We'll continue working with the Burton and King and the O'Hare and Sherrer articles as examples. One of the reasons I included the part of the worksheet about the design is to help us remember that the design will influence the knowledge we can take away from the study. If it's not an experiment, we can't think about it in terms of cause and effect. Authors aren't always as precise as could be and do sometimes make statements that would seem like they did an experiment, but when we look at the variables, we realize they didn't manipulate anything or even measure naturally occurring groups for a quasi-experimental design. That said, remember an experiment technically has two defining characteristics: at least one variable that's manipulated or controlled, and random assignment to the conditions. In other words, each participant has an equal likelihood of being in any of the levels or the groups created by the independent variable. The process of identifying the variables for Burton and King helped us find all of the information we need to know this was an experimental study. In some cases, authors will not include information about how participants were assigned. If they manipulate a variable as part of the operational definition, we still tend to call it an experiment in absence of another category. Note, too, that the authors didn't use words cause and effect in the hypothesis. It goes along with the idea I mentioned earlier in other videos about not using the word prove and about thinking about generalizability. The language they use allows for the possibility that other variables were involved. Now pause this recording to look at O'Hare and Sherrer and complete the research design section of that worksheet. All of the variables in O'Hare and Sherrer were measured, so it's not an experiment. Hopefully you would question the ethics of manipulating some of those variables, like substance use, and we can't manipulate gender, though gender is sometimes treated as the independent variable in a quasi-experimental design. Symptoms of stress would be hard to manipulate, though. We could read studies, though, that talk about how to manipulate levels of stress to measure the symptoms. Hopefully, knowing about APA style and working through the other sections of the worksheet combines with your knowledge about the types of designs to make this process of identifying the design pretty straightforward. As I mentioned in talking about Burton and King, we do sometimes come across articles that manipulate a variable and don't mention how participants were assigned to groups. We typically consider that an experiment, but things like that are part of the reason we use words like suggests and indicates. They add to the possibility that other variables were going on.